Look at that. Left-handed. So this is the first one.
Good evening and welcome to the Ogden City wrong one. See, I already got yours messed up. The City Council Special Meeting Agenda for January 12th, 2016. Let the record show that all council members are present. And I would like to turn the time over to Vice Chair Blair for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please take a moment of silence. Thank you. So next up on our agenda is a request to be on the agenda from the Family Promise of Ogden. Presentation, I think, by Nancy Davis Broderick. Please welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here today and talk about Family Promise. Family Promise is an interfaith outreach program. Speak into the microphone, please. It's an interfaith outreach program that caters to homeless families with children. And we are a national organization, and it was founded back in New Jersey in 1988. And right now, there are 199 of these affiliates across the United States. In Utah, we have one in Salt Lake that's been in operation for 20 years. They just had their 20-year anniversary in October, and they have served over 800 families, and they have a 95% success rate of getting these families back on their feet. I'd like to talk about the program, but first I'd like to show you a 2-minute clip about the program in Salt Lake to give you a good feel for it, and then I'll give you all the details and talk about why I'm here after that. Yes?
Problem that is 95% successful. That's hard to believe, and it's small in scope, but it's working. It's a nonprofit group called Family Promise, using volunteers from various faiths. Many of us think of this when we think of the homeless, but this is the other face of homelessness. That's precisely who Family Promise helps.
I mean, it's never fun to say that you're homeless. It's never fun to say that you don't have a place to go. But with the Family Promise, I don't mind saying that because we're not homeless. We have a place to go. We have a place to stay.
The families that come through our doors are wonderful human beings, worthy of love and respect.
This national nonprofit operates a center in Salt Lake City away from the downtown shelters. The program has incredible numbers to show it's working.
Every year we have about a 95% success rate of the families who come through us get into stable housing, and then we also track them 2 years out and provide 2 years of aftercare service, and those folks 100% are still housed.
The key? Each week, a different church building is transformed into housing for up to 4 families on nights and weekends. Volunteer church members provide families with beds and food.
We're interfaith, but non-proselytizing.
That's because volunteers and pastors just want to help.
Met some incredible people who have a lot of education, people whose children have been ill, and people who have come out of relationships that weren't healthy, but they are now pulling themselves together and going back to work or getting an education. It's just astounding to see how hard some of these folks are working.
Living at the churches, it felt homey and it felt safe.
During the day, families head to the Family Promise Day Center in Salt Lake. There, they can get new clothes for jobs, toys for kids, and various other items for day-to-day living. The center has internet access, laundry facilities, and day rooms for kids. The Family Promise Shelter, providing a future many never thought possible.
Future looks amazing. Truly.
Quite a program. Family Promise relies on donations, both monetary and practical, like food and clothing. Now, the group is also looking for other churches that might want to help. If you want to get involved, go to goodforutah.com. We'll be right back.
So that's a really good quick overview of the program. How it works is, I'll give you a little more details, is, like I said, it's interfaith based. We have, you need between 10 and 13 congregations to be able to get the program started. And right now we currently have 7 churches in the community that have already committed. We have 2 that are going to their board and their vestry, and we're hoping within the next couple weeks they will want to be on board with us. We've spent a lot of time with them. And so our efforts are still recruiting congregations right now. How the program works is it goes from a Sunday to Sunday, and like I said, they do, if you have 10 to 13 churches, once every quarter, the church will host the families for 1 week at a time. And so it goes from a Sunday to a Sunday, and the volunteers bring in all of the food. They stay in the churches. There's always 2 volunteers at a time, and then we have a van that comes in and brings the families from the churches in the evening, so that they can stay in the church. Then in the morning they come back and at around 7:30, pick up the families and bring them back to the day center. And then at the day center, like they said, they send the kids off to school, the parents go to work. If they don't have a job, this is where they have internet access so that they can access jobs. And then we also will have a director, and which will do intensive case management, and also helps the getting housing and helping them if they need any kind of like management, social services, those kind of things. The directors help them with that. We have a van that, like I was talking about, the Family Promise van has already been donated to us by the United Methodist Church, which is wonderful. And we've already got more than half of our churches. So what we're focusing now on is our day center building. And what we're looking for is we want this day center to be local, like right in downtown Salt Lake, so it's close to the train stations, it's close to the buses, and then also the social services that are already here. Family Promise is trying to integrate with all the programs that we already have. We're not trying to take over any programs. I mean, all we're trying to do is help. Our segment is the families with the children. And so our ideal building would be about 1,000 square foot. It needs to have washer machine and dryers, and then it needs to have a men and women's restroom, and it does not need to have a big kitchen. It's just a kitchen for a microwave and a refrigerator. And then the building also needs like 2 small rooms for the case management, which of course needs to have, doors for privacy, and then an area for the kids to have the internet access and the parents to be able to spend time while they're waiting to go to work or to go back to the day center. One of our hope of being here is seeing if there is any kind of community buildings out there that might be able to be subsidized, that we might be able to work with, seeing if we can get some kind of a building downtown. And then, of course, the other thing that we're looking at is we're doing our fundraising, and so we are looking to get, we're a nonprofit, so we're waiting for our designation, which we're hoping would have been here about a month ago. So we're still waiting for that designation, but as soon as we get it, we were hoping to be able to see if there's any kind of seed money in the city council, or if there's any kind of grants that you might know of that we can apply for, that we can start getting our services out in the open, and then also perhaps to be able to get in the resource guide so that we can start being part of what what Ogden City and the Weber County is trying to offer for our homeless families. Dave, have I said everything? I know I'm talking really fast. I know I don't have a lot of time.
Can you state how much is going to be needed, and maybe just a little more background on how you're not part of Family Promise? You're not hired by Family Promise. Just a little bit about the background.
Okay, we need to have, our budget is going to be about $110,000, and before we start, our plan is to start in July or August of this year, and opening up our doors, and we need about $50,000 in between there in that time to start up, which is what, like I was saying, we're getting hoping to get grants, donations. There's a lot of sponsors that are in Salt Lake that sponsor that, if you fundraise a certain amount of money, they also match that money. So we're going to be working with some of the sponsors in Salt Lake to see if they would be interested in doing the same ones up here in Ogden. I am not a spokesperson for Family Promise. I'm the one that's creating the nonprofit up here. I see that there's a huge need, and I had worked at when it was the St. Anne's, I worked there just helping with the clothes and stuff for a couple months, and I just kind of saw a lot of families that had kids there, and it kind of broke my heart. So anyway, there's a need here, and we're finding that with all our congregations. We have a lot of people that are interested and that are wanting. I mean, the best part of it is you can go do a little bit at your church and really be able to touch lives and be able to have hands-on helping, and really for a very minimal amount of effort. So that's what Family Promise is about. And so is there questions or?
Any questions?
I think it's a wonderful event that a program that you're sponsoring. I think it certainly has some needs. I am kind of wondering if there is, I mean, how well is it being accepted by the local churches? Is it?
We've got already 7 host congregations that have committed to us, and then we've got 2 that. One is the Episcopal Church, and the other is a Unitarian. Yeah, They're going through their board, and they're very excited. They just have to, of course, make sure that they can get enough volunteers. But we also have a couple of the LDS stakes that don't have the buildings, but they have the volunteers, and so they're going to be a whole bunch of our supporting congregations.
Right.
So for the smaller churches that have a building but don't have as many people, then we're collaborating together, and we're finding that it's there's a big need here, and the people are working together, and it's like amazing to see how they want to be able to do an outreach program that's kind of their ministry.
Well, thank you for your good efforts.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate the interfaith efforts as well. And as things progress, please keep us posted.
Thank you very much.
So next on our agenda is the approval of minutes. Item A is the closed executive session of September 15th, 2015. Vice Chair Blair.
Yes, thank you, Chair White. I have reviewed those minutes and found them to be accurate.
And then the closed executive session of October 13th and November 17th, and the regular meeting on October 27th of 2015. Councilmember Heyer.
Yes, Chair White, I have reviewed those and found them to be accurate.
And the closed executive session of October 27th and the Board of Canvass of November 17th of 2015. Councilmember Gardner.
Yes, Chair White, I've reviewed those and found those minutes to be correct.
And the special meeting of November 10th, 2015. Councilmember Stevens.
Yes, Chair, I've reviewed those minutes and they're correct, and I make a motion that we adopt the minutes that have been presented.
Second.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Stevens and second by Councilmember Heyer. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Great. And the next thing on our agenda is a common consent item declaring Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service. I'd like to, it's kind of, usually we read a proclamation or a resolution at this point, but on January 18th at 9 a.m., we're going to actually be reading it at the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Breakfast in March. The march will be, or the event is, as I said, January 18th from 9 to 11 at the Marshall White Center. And the theme is the fierce urgency of now. Stand up for equal discipline of all children in schools. This is an event, it's a collaboration event with the Ogden Branch NAACP, Weber States Black Scholar United, Cecil, and the Diversity and Inclusion programs. So we invite you to come and meet us there and hear this great joint proclamation. And I see Dr. Ellington out there, or Reverend Ellington out there. I appreciate you being here. Is there?
And Chair White, I'll make a motion that we adopt this proclamation for the Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service.
I second it.
There is a motion by Councilmember Garner and a second by Councilmember Stevens. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. The next is the reports from the Planning Commission. Here to present accessory dwelling units amendment is Mr. Montgomery.
Madam Chair and members of the council, presenting to you tonight a recommendation from the Planning Commission regarding accessory dwelling units, typically referred to as ADUs, amending our existing ordinance to allow accessory dwelling units to be use permitted in all residential zones. Let me give you a brief background of the accessory dwelling units. They're really not a new idea. They're as old as housing. And the concept of the accessory dwelling unit is to allow an owner-occupant of a home to rent out a small space. Generally, these were referred to as granny flats, mother-in-law apartments, those type of things, so that the homeowner could have a couple ways to either take care of parents, or children could take care of parents, the newlyweds, if you will, just beginning could have a way to help subsidize their income as they look to buy a home. And so the accessory dwelling unit, under that concept, has been in place for years. You probably all know someone in your neighborhood who does something like this, but presently they're not allowed in the city. And back in 2000, when we were first taking a look at trying to stabilize owner occupancy, we had proposed the idea of looking at accessory dwelling units when we did downzoning of much of the city from R2 to R1. That, however, did not catch hold until 2008 when we took a look at doing accessory dwelling units only as community plans identified areas where they could be located. At that point, the Mount Ogden Community Plan had identified an area, let me just pull out that plan to show you, had identified an area near Weber State where this is happening at the Planning Commission. They're not focused.
Ooh, almost.
So the area around 36th Street and 35th was designated as a potential area where accessory dwelling units could take place in the Mount Ogden Community Plan. That was the first introduction to the idea of accessory dwelling units and how they would be allowed. And at that point, a chapter in the zoning ordinance, chapter 32, was created to address then the standards of accessory dwelling units and to outline that if they were to be considered in the city, they would be considered only by a petition to amend the community plan, and after amending the community plan, then looking at rezoning with an overlay area. Since that time, 3 areas have been added as accessory dwelling unit locations. One area being between 22nd and 24th, and Adams and Monroe. The next one being the area by Weber State. By Weber State, here's 36th, here's 35th Street, so kind of including that area around the campus. And then another area that has been added was just to the south of Weber State, between Harrison and Country Hill.
You'll need to push your graphic up.
I'll push that down so you can see that. So here's Country Hills Drive, so that area just off Country Hills Drive up to Harrison Boulevard, and the old McKay side being the boundary, so that little neighborhood. Those are the present 3 areas where ADUs could be considered based on the present ordinance of petitioning to amend the plan, then doing a zoning overlay, and going through that process. One of the things we've had a concern with, and the council has asked us then to address, was the feeling that if accessory dwelling units are important to the community, and we feel they are in terms of establishing home ownership and maintaining home ownership through the life cycle of an occupant of that house. And again, if you think of what takes place in your life, there are times when you need more room, there are times when you've got a lot of room in the house and something else could be done there. And the accessory dwelling units is a way to keep home ownership taking place in the community, which is important, but then allow for those owners to either help someone starting out to have some housing, or if they're older, to have someone with them who could actually look out after them. And then in the middle of time, when you don't need that space and it's all occupied by a family, then that can take place. The home is always considered as a single-family home in this scenario. And the real key part of this is that it always has to be an owner-occupied home to allow this to take place. This can't become a duplex. For example, if the owner goes on vacation, goes away for the wintertime, that's allowed, except they just can't rent out the unit they leave. They can still have that, those people who are renting there, and under the ADU, you're allowed 2 adults and their minor children. But you can't then rent out your other space. So you're always in control as the owner of how your space is, that you're the responsible person, and then allows, again, that ability to create other housing stock in the community for the various levels of income we have in the community. So there are real advantages to the accessory dwelling unit. So under the proposal which the Planning Commission is proposing tonight, they're proposing that we eliminate Chapter 32 of the zoning ordinance, which sets out the standards of plan amendments, of zoning amendments, and looking at putting those standards of what an accessory dwelling unit is in the regulations applicable to all zones, so that all single-family homes can take advantage of this ADU concept. Again, many of you know people in your neighborhood are doing it already. And this would then really kind of create the way to make it legal. What the ADU requires, as I mentioned, is owner occupancy. The accessory dwelling unit is subordinate to the main building. In other words, it could be an outlying building, a space above a garage. It could be a basement. It could be anything that meets the standard of not being a majority of the house space in terms of square footage, have independent living units. In other words, it has a bathroom, it has a kitchen, it has sleeping quarters. So the people who live in that unit are completely independent. But again, the size is limited to 2 adults and the minor children. And you don't have to do alterations to the home to accomplish this. You're not putting in additional parking. You're not taking out other areas to create a brand new entrance. The home still looks like a single-family home and operates, because at some point you may not have an ADU. It may just be a complete single-family home. The other item I think that's important to understand, as I mentioned, the community plans, and especially the Mount Ogden community plan, where they were clear that they only wanted accessory dwelling units in this location. And that was followed up with the Mount Ogden community plan, where they had identified, and I think I just set that map aside, identified areas in the East Central area where they also looked at ADUs as being appropriate in this area here and not appropriate in these areas, where those two plans are specifically identifying ADUs. The ordinance is being revised from what the Planning Commission had recommended to, again, honor the community plans of those two areas, and saying ADUs can only happen in those areas identified in the plan. And that we would then go out, if you consider adopting this ordinance tonight, then go out and do to these two communities an outreach program to find out if they wish to amend the community plan to allow ADUs to expand beyond what the community plan had identified. And we'd do that through a process of a public notification, getting public input, then holding a public hearing for those two community plans, then to act on that and then bring that recommendation back to you for your final action for those two communities. But other than that, we would recommend, and the Planning Commission's recommendation to you is to approve a revision of the ordinance, eliminating Chapter 32, and then taking the standards for accessory dwelling units and placing them in Chapter 13 so they'd be applicable to all residential zones in Ogden City. Questions you may have of me?
Greg, not a question, but a clarification, if you would, just for the public, is the permit requirements.
Okay. Yes, the ordinance requires that an accessory dwelling unit have a permit each year. They're to be basically considered just like we do for other rentals. there's the disproportionate fee of $156, but if you take the good landlord, it's $13, what the license would be each year. So for that right. What it does is it helps ensure that the space that's being rented out is safe and meets the requirements of health and sanitation. We don't want to get a situation where people are placed in bad living conditions. This, again, is looking at creating good housing stock throughout the community, and that is a key thing. We don't want to create a bad living situation where someone is not safe. And so that is part of that review, is that inspection of the building to make sure it meets those standards.
Greg, I've wondered, in as much as this is somewhat different from a regular landlord-tenant relationship, because it is the homeowner's property and they are living there. Is there some reason that you see that we wouldn't want to consider in the future eliminating that good landlord program in order to get the cheap business license? I understand we need the business license because we need the space inspected.
Correct.
But it seems like this does set itself apart a little bit from a regular landlord-tenant relationship.
Well, it's basically taking the same concept we have in the good landlord of an owner-occupied duplex. And so it's how do you make that distinction right now? I don't know that we have any regulations that we can make a distinction because under that, it's still owner-occupied, but it's called a duplex, where they can do the three unrelated or that. And so we'd have to look and see, under the disproportionate fees and that, are there ways we could make amendments there? But presently, as we looked at it, that's the way the regulations are right now.
It was reviewed. You did look at that there is some justification for this, and okay, it just kind of seemed like it kind of hung on and maybe wasn't considered. But if you have considered it, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, that's what we looked at.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And is there a cost to the Good Landlord program?
You have to just come. Well, you have to come to
I don't remember what it is. But there is a cost to attend, but that's only every 2 years, I believe it is.
Yeah. And again, we don't know how that will look in the future, but for right now, that's how it is.
But it isn't the difference between the 13 and the 150.
56, yeah.
Cheap. It's lots cheaper.
Well worth the time.
Is there a time limit or where if I was in an ADU that I would stay there for 1 or 2 years or 3 years or 6 months? Is there a time that is specified with that?
Again, where it's looked at as a dwelling, there is no time limit. I mean, the minimum is 30 days, but some people may choose to be there for the rest of their life. It all depends what that homeowner wants to do as far as that ADU unit. And so who he rents to can vary. They may well like it. They may be college students. They may be there 4 years. It may be an elderly person. It may be there for the rest of their life. There's no time limit per se of how long someone can do this. It's up to them to choose how long they want to use their home that way.
If they want to use it for a bed and breakfast, is that
Well, that's that's not a dwelling. So this is a permanent dwelling space for those people. So these are not for people who are in transit, going from place to place to place. This is their main residence.
What about outside entrance?
Yeah, those are things, a side entrance. Many of the older homes have the front door, have the side door that goes to the basement. Those become really adaptable for an ADU.
So you have to have another entrance besides the front door.
Well, that's going to be up to the owner if he wants to have people come through there to go downstairs or the side entrance. We're saying if you need to add an entrance because you want that separation, that would have to happen to the side or rear, not be in the front, because we still want the home to look like a single-family home, because that's what it is.
And Greg, once they take the Good Landlord program, I'm going back to Councilmember Heyer's question. You only have to take that course once or every 2 years?
I think it's every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
I renew that permit online?
I am not sure on that question. I don't know whether we're online or not.
The business license are you talking about?
Yeah, the third. I mean, if I get my permit, I want to renew that, but also I want to renew my $13.
You can do that online.
Okay.
So the permit has to be renewed every 2 years?
The permit is renewed every year.
Every year.
But the good landlord qualifications every 2 years.
Now, the training is every 2 years. The qualifications are every year.
So the cost of the $13 is for the renewal of every year or the every 2 years?
Every year.
Every year?
Uh-huh.
And we have the apartment association that does the training, and I'm not sure what they charge.
It isn't much.
Like usually 30 or 40
bucks,
bucks or 25 bucks, I don't know.
So the training is every 2 years. You have to qualify every year and pay your license every year.
I'll explain it to you later.
So it's two different things. You have to have the permit every year, and then you have to do the good landlord program every 2 years, is what we're...
If you want the discount.
If you want, yeah.
Right.
You don't have to.
Right.
But it's worth it.
But it's worth it.
$13.
Greg, changing directions slightly. I have a question as it relates to demand in the community and in the market. We've got these overlays for ADUs in existence, and we know of only one circumstance where it's
Correct.
being used. Are we hearing any overwhelming demand or request for or need for this in the community or in the market?
Well, yes and no. We've had people approach us saying they want to do it, but the cost of doing a plan amendment and that just says, well, I don't want to go that expense, which is, the petition to do that is a $950 petition. And so we know a lot of people want to do it, they look at that, they don't do it, but then they still go ahead and do the housing. Because there's, they want to do it, but there's not a mechanism that's friendly to accomplish that. My estimation is you probably have maybe 30 to 40 of these existing already. They just, because we don't have a provision to allow them, they just go ahead and do it.
And my second question, page 7 of the Planning Commission packet within the materials we were provided, made mention of legal conforming certificates that were issued during the 2000 downzoning process.
Right.
It didn't really elaborate on that. Can you touch on it and clarify?
So a legal conforming certificate was something we did as a compromise when the downzonings took place of our two properties, that the realtors came out and were concerned that we're taking away and going to abolish duplexes by these downzonings. And so the legal conforming certificate was saying that we recognize that if you were a duplex prior to the downzonings in 2000, you have a legal right to always be a duplex, even if your building goes vacant for a year. Their concern was we create everything in non-conforming, then it sits vacant for a year, it loses its right, and all the investment that went into the duplex is gone. And so the legal conforming certificate was a way to say, yes, we'll allow you, because you were a legal duplex when you were established, to continue to be a legal duplex even if you go vacant for a year. And so those legal conforming certificates were issued to do that. Now, we've had people voluntarily remove themselves from that list, saying, no, I don't want that at all. I want to go back to a single-family home, period. And that's, again, why we think an ADU is a really good tool, because people will see different life cycles happen in their housing. And that flexibility is something the ADU provides, which some of the other ones don't, to allow that house to go up and down and always be still a single-family home, but have the ability to be rented out rather than having to become a duplex and then losing those rights. And then the other part is having a home that was a duplex become not owner-occupied, but both units are rented out, where we still want to make sure we have home ownership, and the ADU keeps that home ownership provision going.
What would be the fate of those 40 to 50 units that you said are currently operating illegally?
Well, hopefully then they would have the encouragement to come in and get their license, so that if a neighbor complains or something takes place, they have that certificate to say, no, I can do this. I'm allowed this process. So that's the incentive. And hopefully one of our goals would be that people, as they're looking at buying homes in Ogden, say, for example, they look at a building that had been converted and has that basement apartment in it, and they're trying to figure out, how do I want to be owner-occupied, I want to buy my own home, how do I do that? This ADU will allow them an opportunity to have the additional income to help them in financing that house, because the unit's already there, But now they're saying, I want to live here. I don't want this as a rental. I want to live here, and then I want to control what happens on my property. And so it allows that to happen too.
I agree. I think it does open up some different housing options for a lot of our residents and a lot of our citizens. So I think it helps them that want to live here. It provides more opportunity for them. So I think it's good.
And the reason that those 40 are not reporting because they're not allowed in the areas that they're at, and so now this gives them a mechanism by which they can go ahead and it'll be allowed in the area where they live.
Mm-hmm.
But at the present time, they're outside those zones, and so they're not going to come forward with that.
I think you're being very conservative with 40 also.
Well,
So,
better the air that side than true.
so just curious, why would there be a need for for people to renew their license every year?
Because the ADUs may change. The person might decide, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. And for us to keep a record, make sure it doesn't become a duplex and become no owner occupied anymore. That's our tracking mechanism to make sure it still falls into those rules of owner occupancy.
So I'm just curious, what are the chances that these ADUs are really going to change that often once someone makes the effort to convert their house and to get the license they need? So just that potentially just a license could be required every other year or something like that.
Yeah, I think those are decisions that you can definitely take a look at. The reason why someone may do that is that they're in maybe the middle of their life cycle versus at either end, and that's why they may want to go to the ADU at that point. Abandon the ADU at that point is because they're in the middle of the life cycle and they need more space for their family.
Sure.
And then come back later as a marketing part.
Sure.
So that's why the fluctuation may happen.
So how do we handle if we pass this and then we find out an individual's housing is having this ADU, but they haven't come in and applied for the license? How do we handle that after we pass this?
Well, those will be things that we'll do on a complaint basis with code enforcement. Hopefully, we're counting on with the press and those other things that people will take a look, oh, now I can do that. I can do it legal. I don't have to worry about, is my neighbor going to report me or anything like that? And hopefully through that system, we will be able to get the process operating.
So there's no fines or penalties associated with that?
Right now, there's not. Right now, if someone complained about it, there could be a potential penalty. The correction now, if there's a complaint, is go get your license.
Greg, I got one more question. I spent my day-to-day studying fiscal notes, so fiscal implications are top of mind right now. How would these units affect revenue, either through licensing or property taxes?
The way we're defining them as a single-family home, we purposely did that so it would not create a category that's an income-producing property that the county would then assess it as that. We're still saying this is a single-family residential dwelling, and by definition, we make that distinction so that the property taxes would still stay the same. I think the business license would just be minimal. If you do the $13, that's not going to be a...
With the exception of maybe the improvements being made to the property and thereby increasing property value.
Yeah, I guess it's the question if you have a home and you go ahead and put in your basement an entertainment center or another second kitchen there. Generally, I don't know that increases that value that much unless you were doing an expansion of the home to accomplish that. Then the taxes would still be the same whether you did the expansion for your family or because you're doing this ADU unit to it.
Thanks.
That's really a matter of the county's assessment wizards anyway, isn't it?
Because it'll be, again, it's the property value of the building.
Hey, Greg, will you describe the process for the two community plans, how you're going to reach out to them and ask?
Okay. Our approach to this, at least what we've talked about initially, is to send out to those communities through the water bill a link to a survey And in that would explain what the ADU is about and asking, you're part of this community, would you please take this survey about your opinion? Is this something that you feel should be allowed in your community or not? Because your community said you only want to limit it in certain areas. And after a time period where we have that survey in place, take those results, and then would schedule a public hearing as a normal planning commission item to look at amendment to these two community plans. And again, have the public have an opportunity to come and voice their opinion, yea or nay, of should an amendment be made or should it stay the way it is. And then based on that recommendation, that would be forwarded to you to then look at a final decision on those two community plans.
I have a question about that. It's, oftentimes when you notice a public hearing, nobody comes. What will you assume from that?
Well, I think what we'd assume from that is, again, how we word our notice, that either they don't care about it at that point. That's the assumption that, okay, you say you're going to make this change, I don't have a problem with that, so I'm not going to show up.
Okay.
Generally, the ones who come are those who don't like that idea.
Yeah, that was why I asked the question. I thought, that could go either way. That could mean either thing, depending on how you worded it.
Yeah.
So, all right, thank you.
And just to make sure, this was passed unanimously in the Planning Commission, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Multiple times.
Yeah. Perfect.
Fantastic. If there's no other questions, we're going to open it up for public input. Seeing no movement,
Well, Chair White, if I could make a motion that we adopt ordinance 2016-2.
Second.
so we have a motion by
Councilmember Heyer.
Heyer and a second by Councilmember Gardner to accept or adopt the proposed ordinance 2016-2. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Garner,
Aye.
Councilmember Heyer,
Aye.
Councilmember Lopez,
Aye.
Councilmember Nadolski,
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens,
Aye.
Vice Chair Blair,
Aye.
Chair White.
Aye, that passes. That has been a long time coming for you.
Chair White, this is. I think this is really going to be a help to our community. I know that there's a lot of people that currently do it, and I don't think they're deliberately trying to skirt the law. I think they just think it should be legal and don't know it's not. And this will allow them to, when they discover that there is a way for them to be legal and that they're probably not, I think many will come and get their license, and it will be a good thing for longevity of home ownership in a person's life cycle. I'm happy that we've done this today.
Well, I think it's a clarification and it also provides a more manageable housing program for our area. So, but I think there's a lot of clarifications that we've addressed here tonight.
Great. Thanks. Reports from administration. We are, I think, what's that? Yeah, for the RDA Wasatch Brownfields Coalition loan, Mr. Cooper.
Nope, not a chance.
Just about.
Jeez.
Oh, much better.
Getting better.
That's better, right? No. She'll fix it. I think we just need the top portion.
That's okay.
That's good.
Okay.
If I can see it, it's good.
Just for you.
Thank you.
Well, good evening. Thank you for your time. I have a few requests this evening. The first is the request for a loan guarantee for a $400,000 loan from the Wasatch Brownfields Coalition for the environmental remediation at the Trackline Economic Development Project area for the benefit of the Ogden Business Exchange project. The loan, as I mentioned, is for $400,000. It carries a 2% interest rate. It's an interest-only term, so it does have a quarterly interest payment of $2,075 with a balloon payment of $400,691. So this loan is between the Redevelopment Agency and the Wasatch Brownfields Coalition. The request in the resolution is actually for the loan guarantee by the city. The environmental remediation is ongoing at the project. We're dealing with some semi-volatile organic compounds and some heavy metals that have been dealt with through a voluntary cleanup program between the Redevelopment Agency and the state. So this loan has been programmed for that in the original project pro forma. We've been working towards this date since 2011 when we actually, as a member of the coalition, Ogden City, we actually received the grant funds to be able to then loan forward to a project like this. So the request this evening is for the loan guarantee for the $400,000, and it's our recommendation that you approve Resolution 2016-3. Any questions?
Can you explain how this came about, the coalition, who we're working with, and how it was just formulated and organized?
Sure. As I mentioned, it's a coalition between the Salt Lake Redevelopment Agency, Salt Lake County, and Ogden City. We joined forces in 2011. The EPA puts out requests for proposals for their grant funds. In this case, it was $1 million to establish a revolving loan fund. We were successful in 2011 to as an award recipient for that. We've been working on establishing the terms and conditions and the program of that grant fund for this entire duration, and this would be the actual first loan made by the coalition to the Redevelopment Agency. So it's a great thing for development in general. It's a great thing for Ogden City to be a part of it as a coalition member, and it's a great thing for the project and the redevelopment of that area. Any other questions?
Nope.
Sorry, Brandon, I do have a question.
I was almost out of here.
So close. I'm just looking at, since we're discussing a loan guarantee, it's the intent that we'll be using proceeds from the tax increment funds as well as from land sales from the RDA to pay for these?
The way that the project is structured is that there's certain project revenues that have been identified. The ones that you have mentioned are the primary project revenues, tax increment, and the sales proceeds from the sale of land. So those are the things that will not only pay the interest payments, but also the balloon payment at the end of the term.
Okay.
There is and I appreciate you reminding me, there is a match in terms of this loan that's necessary. That has been already appropriated in previous funds, the CDBG grant dollars that were previously appropriated, as well as the HUD 108. Those are dollars already spent, so we've met that match with no new appropriation. This is a guarantee for the new funds that would be received.
Okay. I have two more questions, sorry, because I'm playing catch up.
Sure.
Being the new guy, one of the new guys.
I have all night.
So I was interested in knowing if we had any proceeds from land sales had already occurred. I was able to find those records in the Salt Lake County portion of the package. Looks like we've sold 11.6 acres of the 22.58. Is that?
No. So we have conveyed one parcel, which is 7.56 acres. That is to a company called Two Mules, LLC, and they're currently under construction for a 75,000-ish square foot manufacturing plant. We had another parcel under contract. It was 3 acres, and that contract fell through. Currently, we're working with 2 other potential tenants or owners for the purchase of 2 additional parcels.
Okay, so I'm asking these questions because I'm curious on the payment schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a 16-quarter payment schedule outlined in the packet for an ultimate total of $432,000.
Right.
The payments per quarter, don't add up to the 432. So I'm curious how we plan on paying for this over time. And then the corresponding Schedule A payment schedule is also empty.
Yeah, the payment schedule in the actual loan docs was for just for reference only. There is an actual payment schedule that is an amortization schedule that's to be followed. So I think what was in the packet was just for reference.
Okay, so the terms of the loan are fairly flexible until the end when the balloon payment's due, correct?
Right, we structured it as an interest only.
Yeah, there's a minimum.
Just to give us the ability to ramp up that project revenue. In the event that there isn't sufficient project revenue to pay the interest, then the way that the agreement with the developer is structured is that those project costs, this becomes a project cost to the project, is paid by the developer.
Okay, but it's important to note, I think, from what I'm gathering, that we're planning to pay this loan with projected proceeds.
Correct.
Not with proceeds we've already realized, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Good question.
The 16 payments, that's just to pay off the interest.
Right, those
on
are
the
interest
loan,
only,
so
correct, yeah.
That's where the payments are going to go to.
Right. So the principal balance will remain the $400,000.
And when we're making this decision, we've got 4 years to realize those proceeds in order to pay off this loan.
And
with the exception of interest only.
Correct. With the exception of the interest, we've scheduled the whole project to really be a 5-year project from inception to completion. So all of our funding sources and our development work has been geared towards that 5-year period. And that's crucial because of how tax increment is scheduled. There's a period in which tax increment can be generated. It's 20 years from 2013. So that each year that we don't incur development, which then results in tax increment, we're kind of diminishing that revenue window. So it's in our best interest to get these lots sold as quickly as possible within that 5-year period. Okay, good questions, thank you.
Any other questions?
No. If you're ready for a motion?
Yep, looking for a motion.
I move that we adopt proposed resolution 2016-3.
I second it.
We have a motion to adopt the proposed resolution by Councilmember Heyer, second by Councilmember Stevens. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Heyer,
Aye.
Councilmember Lopez,
Aye.
Councilmember Nadolski,
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens,
Aye.
Member Garner,
Aye.
Vice Chair Blair,
Aye.
Chair White.
Aye. That passes. Next up on our agenda is public comments. This is an opportunity to address the council regarding your concerns or ideas. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Forrest Crawford, professor at Weber State University. I've been there for 38 years now. Rose Park resident, but a longtime employee of Weber State University. I'm here because I'm also a co-founder of the now advisor to the State Martin Luther King Jr. Human Rights Commission. I think I've addressed this commission before, and I wanted to ask you to consider the reinvestigating the honorary designation of the name Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard onto 24th Street. And I'm asking you to do that because the honorary designation only goes up to from the west side up to Washington Boulevard. When we submitted the original request, I think that former Councilman Garcia was the sponsor of the deliberations on that bill at the time. When I'd sent in a request to at the time it was the Mayor's Multicultural Advisory Board, asking them to add the name of Martin Luther King Jr. onto one of the streets, and I think that the street that they identified was 24th Street. But the proposal was to go all the way east up to, I believe, Buchanan, I believe it is. Certainly, at least up to Washington. The short of it is that there was a great deal of controversy. There were some residents that ran along the 24th Street residency area that did not want Martin Luther King Jr.'s name as on that street. And so the short version of it is that the proposal was a compromise that, as a result, ended up relegating itself to the west side. I think it's been several years now, and I'd like for this council to reconsider the honorary designation in the spirit that not only you've recognized this proclamation of what Dr. King stood for, but I also believe that we may be in a little different climate than it was before. If you go back and investigate the notes of the deliberations several years ago, you'll find that residents were all over the map in terms of their feeling about Martin Luther King and the honorary designation. There was some misinformation with the assumption that we were not honorary designating, but we was actually changing the name of 24th Street to Martin Luther King Street. And so after we cleared that information, that there were some residents who felt a bit more comfortable with it. But I think my time is lapsed. But I'm just asking you to reinvestigate and reconsider having the name, honorary name Martin Luther King to go beyond the west side.
Thank you, Dr. Crawford.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, after the public comments, I'd like to address that if I could, please.
Anyone else?
Good evening. Reverend Stanley Ellington, the president of the Ogden branch of the NAACP. I would like to publicly express my support to the motion that Dr. Crawford has presented to you all to reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? With that?
Thank you. Dr. Crawford actually had mentioned this in the Talk of the Town meeting that the council held on campus. Some short time after that, Councilmember Wicks actually requested that we look at this extension, along with an extension for the Cesar Chavez honorary designation. That has been in process, so the good news that all we're waiting on are the actual costs, and then the council will be able to consider. So we did move forward, wanted you to know that. And we're very close to be able to presenting it to the council.
Bill, for very close clarification, what kind of timeline does that mean?
Within weeks.
Within weeks.
Mm-hmm. And do we establish from where to where that designation goes? Or?
You do,
okay.
Yes, you do.
Perfect.
And it's proposed to extend both, I believe, to Harrison Boulevard.
It was suggested that there's a difference between changing the name of the street and then making an honorary designation. Much like we do with schools, the street name doesn't change, but there's an honorary designation. So what would we be expecting?
The request was for an honorary street name change.
Okay.
Yes.
Other comments? Comments from the mayor?
Appreciate everybody being here and your comments and the opportunity to work on that. And in case any of you missed it, just to bring a little highlight, Sunset Magazine named Ogden City as the best mid-sized city in America over the weekend in a printed copy. So always fun to see those types of things and people taking notice of what a great place we live in.
I was hoping you hadn't seen that.
Did I take your comment?
No.
Okay. Sorry if I did. That's it.
Anything from council members?
I want to say.
Bring that forward.
I want to say I moved one chair closer to the mayor in our relocation of the chair. So for the next year, I'll be one closer to him. So
you'll be shin kicking me.
Yeah.
Under the table.
I just want to thank Dr. Crawford for coming over tonight and addressing us about your request, and also Reverend Ellington. Thank you, and I'm just really glad to hear that that's been proposed and that we're going to be looking at that. So just thank you very much for that.
I want to actually, I was going to say the same thing. I wanted to thank Reverend Ellington and Dr. Crawford for bringing that forward. I'm anxious to see the proposal and the cost estimates associated with it. I'd also like us to consider, or at least be presented with opportunities to extend beyond Harrison Boulevard into the East Bench neighborhood as well.
I think that's Jayhawk Way, actually.
Oh, darn it. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Councilmember Heyer and second by Councilmember Garner.
All in favor?
Voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?